Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing martial art in the United States today. Rising to prominence at the top of the UFC, to finding famous enthusiasts the likes of Demi Lovato and Jonah Hill. It has become popular not only because of its physical benefits, but also because of the increased mental acuity that it brings its students. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by my friend Jerad Downs, one of the owner-operators of Lincoln Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Lincoln, Nebraska. This is going to be a good one. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Caught on the Mic. Jerad, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good.
Good. Thanks for doing this. Looks like you've had a fun afternoon putting the work in.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of my job now. Got to stay healthy. Got to make sure I don't get injured so I can keep teaching.
Why don't you take a couple of minutes and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Started doing martial arts as a kid. I actually started in Millard, Nebraska. Steve Jenham, who you might know from UFC, like early on, I think it was number 3. He was my first teacher. We did something called Taijitsu, which was basically early MMA. So depending on whatever instructor we had there for that day, we did whatever style they wanted to do. So sometimes we did some judo, sometimes we did ground fighting, sometimes we did straight karate, it just depended on who we got that day. So I did that for a long time. Then I started fencing in high school, did that for 3 or 4 years, and then went to college and didn't do hardly anything. Wanted to get back in shape, started going to the gym, realized I hated going to a gym. But I thought, hey, I like to do sports. I could do sports all day. Maybe I'll get back into martial arts. So started doing jiu-jitsu at Shohei Shobukan here in Lincoln. I believe that was 2013. Started there. My teacher was Conan Schaefer. Eventually we left. Me and Conan and Greg, the 3 partners at Lincoln Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Center, left there. Started our own place in 2013. And I guess I started 2007 was when I started at Shohei Shobukan. And then 2013, we started our own place up on 40th and O Street. And last year, we moved into this beautiful new building here at 40th and Prescott.
Oh, fantastic. And this is a very, very impressive facility. If you follow us on our Facebook page, I will be posting a few pictures to go along with this episode of the podcast. How long have you been running this establishment then?
I've been full-time here since November 2019.
Okay.
I was a partner from the very beginning, so early 2013. Wow. Been a partner, not full-time, but teaching a couple classes, and then involved in the kind of business end of it.
Sure.
For most of that time, I was working at Walgreens. I was a store manager, and I started, right about that time, I became a store manager when we started the school. Maybe a year after that, I became a store manager. So I was doing that full-time and then doing a little teaching on the side and training a lot. And got to make the big leap last year to do this full-time, and I couldn't be happier.
Fantastic. Let's say somebody's listening to this, they have no idea what jiu-jitsu is or Brazilian jiu-jitsu is. Give us a little bit of backstory on jiu-jitsu and kind of its roots.
So Brazilian jiu-jitsu is called Brazilian jiu-jitsu because there's this guy, Count Maeda, from Japan, was like a judoka, came to Japan and showed, I believe, Elio and Carlos Gracie judo. And he was a bigger guy and a stronger guy, and that's great. It was a really good system, but it didn't really work for the smaller, weaker guys. So Elio and Carlos took the concepts and they refined it over time to make their own style, which was, instead of judo, where it's, mostly about the throws and the trips and taking people down, they focused more on the actual ground fighting aspect of it. So that's kind of where it came from. It's meant to be, it's set up so technique can overcome strength. So a little guy has a good shot against a bigger guy as long as they've got, better technique. So that's why it's really effective for, self-defense type stuff, is because it's all built on like using leverage and using timing and that sort of thing. If I had to describe it to somebody from Nebraska who doesn't know anything about it, I would say it's wrestling with a traditional martial arts uniform, but I'm not trying to pin you. I'm trying to break your arm or choke you.
That's a good way to describe it. It's jiu-jitsu itself, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is still relatively young in the United States.
Yeah, it really didn't. I think most of the early people doing it, the black belts that moved to the United States, didn't really come here till like the early 90s.
Yeah.
So in terms of martial arts here in the U.S., it's one of the younger ones for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of it got integrated once, organizations like the UFC and such started taking off, and the Gracie family made themselves very prominent in that organization.
Yeah, and I like the very early UFCs where Hoist Gracie was even wearing the gi.
Yeah.
It was basically set up to be a big infomercial for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Oh, wow.
They didn't pick, at least I've heard stories that they didn't pick the best, most athletic brother.
Right.
They picked Hoist, who was kind of like a skinny guy, didn't look very imposing, going up against all these like bodybuilders and Olympic wrestlers and stuff. And, he was beating them with technique. And
right.
It was really cool to watch.
Yeah, I've read that multiple times, that if any of the Gracies were going to be the prime example, it would have been Hickson, right?
Right.
So what do you think your mission is as an instructor and as a business owner?
Well, as an instructor, I want all my students to be really good at jiu-jitsu. I find a lot of benefit from it, from working out, so that makes me feel good, knowing how to move my body. If I would ever come into, a self-defense issue, I would know how to handle myself, which, by the way, mostly leave is how you handle yourself in a self-defense situation. But, if anyone put hands on me, I'd know what to do. So that's good. It's a brotherhood. You make a lot of friends here. You're, struggling with them, and you make a lot of connections. So a lot of the people that have been coming, I've known them for a decade now, and I consider them all friends. From a business aspect, I want to, make this place as popular as it can be, so we can keep doing more interesting things. We started an MMA program a couple of years ago, and we can only do that because we have the ability to, buy the equipment and bring in the coaches. And I'd like to do more of that, more equipment, more coaches, more full-time people. I want to make a place where all my friends can basically come and teach jiu-jitsu, and we can share it with everyone.
Yeah, that's something that seems to be very prevalent in the jiu-jitsu circles, is kind of the family-like nature of basically. I had somebody describe it to me one time as your white belt year is a year of you getting choked out by your best friends.
Yeah,
is that true?
Yeah, it totally is. So we had a gathering at my house many years ago. One of the very first jiu-jitsu, like professional jiu-jitsu tournaments that they put on a pay-per-view was called Metamoris. And it was, God, I don't even know, 7-8 years ago, something like that, before a lot of the professional jiu-jitsu was really popular. And so I had a bunch of people over to my house, a bunch of people from the school. We ordered the pay-per-view, had a big potluck, whatever. And my wife was just stunned. She's like, every single person in here is so nice. Like, none of your friends are a-holes.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, because if you have that kind of ego, you can't stand to get choked out by a 130-pound guy. Right? You wash out. So the people that stick around are the people who can swallow their pride, have that small ego, and keep going at it. And those are usually pretty good people.
So what would you say the ratio is of people that stick it out versus those that just throw in the towel almost immediately? Is it generally based on ego?
I don't know, because we get a lot of people who try it out. We do a free week trial.
Sure.
We get a lot of people who try it out and just, it's not for them. They don't come back.
Right.
And I don't usually hear from them why they don't come back.
Right.
The people who come in and they try it and they like it, it is almost instantly obvious that they're hooked.
Right.
You know, they see something about it, and there's something about the type of personality that likes it. So you kind of have to be not too concerned with like touching people, right? Because we're grappling.
Right.
Somebody being sweaty while trying to like, you know, choke you out, that has to not bother you. So you have to get over that hurdle first. So that weeds out a certain amount of the population. And then the people who, it's like people who like puzzle games, people who like a challenge that they can see like, oh, okay, so if I learn all of this stuff, then I can do more and I can see more of how this all works. And they know that it's really hard, but they see a path. Those are the people that their eyes light up when they come in and they're like, yeah, this is what I want to do.
What would you say is the common catalyst that inspires people to make the leap into trying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Right now, honestly, like podcasts, Jocko and Joe Rogan. I mean, they send us more referrals than anyone.
Right.
You know, I mean, the most common way I get people in the door is their friend tells them you should try it.
Right.
Right. But second to that, it's all, I heard about it on Jocko. I heard about it on Rogan.
Right.
You know, they're talking about it all the time. I need to try it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you know, he's talking about Jocko Willink and Joe Rogan, and they both practice the art of jiu-jitsu. And Jocko even has a school now.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he does. But other celebrities that are getting into it, Ed O'Neill, like Al Bundy himself has a black belt in Brazilian
for a long
Jiu-Jitsu.
time.
Yeah.
He's been around.
Yeah, and it's funny because if you get on YouTube and you go down that black hole and you watch some videos, he's not bad either. Right. Like he's pretty lethal himself. Demi Lovato, she used it as a way to help her sobriety.
Yep.
And I think I even saw something on Instagram last week where she's kind of teasing that she might get into some amateur fights.
I hope so.
I do too. I would love to see it. Jim Carrey's doing it now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And he's actually, and I forgot which one of the Gracies is teaching him, but it's one of the Gracies that is teaching him. And then, of course, superhero actors like Henry Cavill and Margot Robbie are both doing it right now too. So.
Ashton Kutcher, purple belt.
Yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, it's Jonah Hill also.
Oh, right, yeah.
He used Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to help slim down. So one of the more popular, I think, aspects, or one of the more popular people to speak out about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu recently was Andrew Yang, who was at one point in the Democratic primaries, and his exact quote was, "It would make us all safer if police officers were Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu purple belts." What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, I think if cops have more tools in the toolbox besides a gun, then they've got more opportunities to use non-lethal force to control somebody. You know, that horrible... was the guy who got, I think it was Jacob Blake, who got shot in the back 7 times or something.
Yeah.
You know, I saw the video of that, and the cop was following him right behind him as he went around the car, got into the car, you know, and the cop ended up shooting him in the back because the guy wasn't listening. And if he had had the skill set to grab him by the shoulder and, you know, kick him in the back of the knee and take him down, all that could have been avoided.
Absolutely.
You know, and having that... It's not even the ability. It's like the ability plus the confidence and knowing how to do that and doing it often. I mean, I think you can avoid a lot of situations like that, you know, and you have various ways to hold people without hurting them and control them without, you know, having to resort to, I don't know what they call them, like distractionary blows where they're kneeing people in the head. It's like, well, you know, if you just bend their arm this way, then they can't move their shoulder, right? Trying to work right now, we've got, I don't know, maybe 10 law enforcement officers who train with us.
Wow.
You know, and the funny thing is I ask them, I go, how come everyone on the police force isn't in here? And they all look at me like, I have no idea.
Right.
Like, I don't know. I don't get it. We should all be doing it. The ones who do it are like, yeah, this is necessary. You know, this is like, it's a core part of their, job skills that they need to know. Like, yeah, they'd like to not put hands on people, but if they got to, then they need to know how to do it. And so I'm trying to work with at least one of the officers right now into figuring out how we can integrate our training into their training with their new recruits at the academy.
Oh, fantastic.
So we've been working with them. It's still in the early stages. I don't know exactly how it's going to look or how it's going to shake out, but we're having that conversation with them, and we really want to make sure that, law enforcement has more tools.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not just law enforcement, just more tools in the fitness toolbox too.
Sure.
I'm a 4:30 a.m. guy. I go to the gym every morning before I go to work. I get my cardio in, I get my lift on, and it's a million times that this is like, man, if I could work something like this into that routine, and this is kind of what's going to lead to my next question for you, is just the additional mental self-awareness that I would have, just that additional control over my body, which is what leads to that question is, why is a foundation rooted in martial arts so important to a person's self-development?
I mean, you have to have, self-control. So like if I were to go out and get wasted and then try to come in the next morning, like I'm going to have a terrible time if I even make it. Right. And something about doing jiu-jitsu, like if you're the type of person who likes to do jiu-jitsu, you get addicted to it, like everyone. And it makes you change other aspects of your life just to be better at it.
Right.
So like, I can't eat like a fat slob because I'm going to feel terrible and I'm going to train worse. I can't go out and get drunk because I'm going to have a hangover and I'm going to train worse. Every day that I get to come in here, I want to be the best that I can. So I end up rearranging other parts of my life to be better. And the other part of that is, the ego shrinking that I've heard about on, basically anyone who talks about doing jiu-jitsu for a long time talks about, that your ego gets really small for most people. There's the kind of like people who come from other disciplines that already have a really good base, and they show up to a beginner class and they're beating up on a bunch of white belts that don't have any idea what they're doing. They're a 16-year college wrestler and they're like, oh, this is easy.
Right.
And, your ego's not going to get any smaller that way because you're just beating up on people. But for most people, you spend the first year or two in here, getting choked, getting your arm hyperextended, and it takes a certain type of person or a certain type of attitude to come back after that happens, and you can't be so up in your head and think that you're the best and then have it constantly prove to you that you're not, and to stick with it. So having it's almost like you're having the ego beat out of you. I don't want to discourage anyone from coming. But that's really what it's hard. You get used to it.
Right.
But it's hard at first.
But so do you think maybe, like you were just talking about why there's not more police in here? Do you think sometimes there's a little bit of intimidation with maybe some of these guys don't want to have their egos checked, or maybe they're intimidated by the idea of being choked out for such a long period of time, or I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, because I've got an 11-year-old son. And he does Taekwondo, and we go on runs. He's addicted to Fortnite, like most kids his age. Mm-hmm. And so whenever he's with me, on the weekends he's with me, we go out on a run. We'll go lift a little bit, and we've run by here a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And I've said to him, maybe you should give this a try. And man, he's scared.
The hardest part is getting in the door.
Yeah.
Once you're in here, you realize how much fun it is. Because we really do have a lot of fun. I mean, it's hard work. Right. It's one of those things where while you're in it, it's really hard.
Right.
And once you're done, you're so glad you came.
Right.
And it's like that with almost anything that's physical. Right. Like you don't want to do it. You wake up in the morning, you don't want to do it. And then after you leave, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I did it.
Right. Absolutely. And I think there's an adage that says, what doesn't challenge you doesn't change you.
Sure.
So what is Jerad's daily routine like?
Oh man, I mean, it's it's different depending on the day because I pretty much handle all of the, day-to-day business things with the school, and I also instruct quite a bit. So usually, I'll be honest, I got a dream job. I don't want to brag, but it's great. I wake up in the morning when my son wakes up. He's 14 months old now, and I wake up when he wakes up. I take care of him all morning. Usually get to the school around 11 or 11:30, teach my first class. Then I've got some time in between classes. Usually I, do a little bit of working out or do some yoga, do business stuff, checking bank accounts, sending emails, changing the website, thinking about, merchandise we're going to order, email, talking to the bank, whatever it is.
Right.
And then, teach a youth class in the evening and then back home.
A couple of episodes ago, I talked about my time playing music, and it was one of those things where your passion, you're like a sponge for the things you like to do, and time just is a construct that doesn't exist anymore. I can relate to kind of doing the business side of things where I would get home from my day job and I would be sitting on a computer and 4 hours had gone by because I was designing merchandise, doing all the booking and all of that along those lines. So I can definitely relate to that. So what are some of the other hobbies you have?
I don't really have that many other hobbies right now. Kids keeping me pretty busy.
Yeah.
I ride my motorcycle every once in a while. I fix things around the house. Really, it's mostly jiu-jitsu and home life.
You said 14 months old?
Yeah.
Man. So when does he get started?
Probably about 3.5.
Excellent. So you said you've integrated an MMA component here to the gym.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
So we had a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu named Nick Honstein move here a couple of years ago, and he is a very accomplished professional MMA fighter. Never made it to the UFC, but lots of regional and international promotions, and won a bunch of belts. And had at the same time we had some people here locally who wanted to get into fighting, and so we started with one MMA class. We eventually brought in an instructor named Nick Norris, who is also a professional MMA fighter. Moved to Lincoln from Columbus, Nebraska, and he teaches a couple times a week. So we've got 4 MMA classes now that we run every week. Still very Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu focused.
Sure.
But integrating, stand-up sparring. Nick Honstein is his style, aside from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is he was a wrestler and does Muay Thai. And then Nick Norris is more of a traditional kickboxer. But yeah, having them in the gym is really good. We have people fighting in local dynasty promotions. Almost every time they have one, we'll have at least one fighter on there. And then, it seems like once or twice a year, we'll have a card with 5 or 6 fighters on there.
Oh, wow.
So that's really fun to do, to have them and go watch them, show their skills off.
Have you ever had it happen where a couple of the students here are in the same weight class and get paired against each other at one of those dynasty events?
No, one of our purple belts works with Dynasty.
Okay.
Very closely.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what his title is there, but he does a lot of work for him.
Sure.
And so he helps us out with getting people on the card and finding fights and making sure we have basically the right fights for our people.
Sure.
So he's a really good conduit into that.
We are in this almost semi-apocalyptic year known as 2020. How did the pandemic affect your training schedule as somebody that practices Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and somebody that does it for their own fitness and well-being?
Basically when we shut down, I didn't train for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. I didn't like it at all.
Right.
I gained about 10 pounds. When I came back, felt really winded and tired and weak and couldn't remember how to move right. Since then, I've gotten it back to where it should be. But yeah, it was rough being off for that long. At the beginning, it was like, okay, well, this is just what we're doing now, and I get some time off, so I get some stuff done around the house, and that's all good. And then a couple months in, it's like, all right, well, when are we gonna get back to it? Like, when are we gonna do this?
Right. If I'm not paying for something, I have a hard time holding myself accountable, if I will. So I'm not a guy that just gets up in the morning and does a run around the neighborhood or lifts weights. I have to go to a gym. I have to have that certain structure. So when the gyms and such shut down, it's like my whole mindset shut down with it.
Yeah.
And it was tough. Like, I was running probably a 7.5, 8 minute mile before COVID. And then after about 2 months, because that was about my layover time too, man, I'm still struggling to get back down to that.
And when we did come back, we came back very carefully, and we had socially distanced classes. We had, we bought a bunch of grappling dummies.
Yeah.
And at very first when we were talking about it, I was not on board with the idea. I thought if we're just going to do solo drills, we're going to do dummy drills, we can do it from home.
Right.
As it got more clear how long we were going to have to be closed and how long it would take us to get back to anything resembling normal, there's a part of jiu-jitsu that's very social.
Right.
And there's a lot of people who most of their friends are here, and they miss their friends. They want to come in. So even though we couldn't really do jiu-jitsu, we could do something that was close to jiu-jitsu, and you could still see your friends. And so it was, almost more of a social aspect than a technical aspect why we came back with the dummies at first. So, yeah, I mean, it's really, really important, that social part of it as well.
Yeah, it's... And I got to commend you guys, because I've been following you on Facebook for quite some time, and I even spent the past couple of days trying to look for it. But the initial statement that you put forth when you did start slowly reopening was so socially responsible. And look, I mean, before we started recording and before we started talking about this, I said that I exist in very socio-political gray area. And I couldn't commend you guys enough for how you handled it and coming back into business.
Yeah, I mean, there's a public health angle to it where, we do have to be very careful. And to be honest, jiu-jitsu is one of the worst things you can do during a pandemic.
Right.
And you're like breathing in your partner's face for an hour. But there's also, the optics of it as well. So we have to not only be responsible, but appear responsible to people who would be looking at us from the outside. So we've got an obligation to our members to be as safe as we can. But, at the end of the day, most of our students are adults, and they can make their own decisions on what they're going to do and their own risk tolerance. And we've taken a lot of steps to ensure that, we can be as safe as we can be.
Going back to personal fitness routines, what's more challenging for you, the diet or the exercise?
Diet, for sure.
Me too.
Yeah.
I often say, man, if I could just get my food under control, I'd be in phenomenal shape. Where do you see yourself a year from now in the business?
God, I hope just back to normal.
Yeah.
I hope we're back with, one of the things that we didn't bring back is open mat.
Right.
So open mat is a time, it's probably anyone who's done jiu-jitsu for more than maybe a year, open mat's almost always their favorite class because they just come in, it's a couple hours, you roll with a bunch of people, you have a lot of fun, you're exhausted when you leave. But because of how many partners you interact with during that 2-hour time, it's something that's very risky right now.
Right.
Even though we temp check everyone when they come in, they all sign a waiver. If you're having, 14 partners during that 2 hours,
right,
like that's a lot of contact. So I hope to get back to that. The other thing that we haven't brought back yet is our little kids. So we normally do a class that starts at 4 years old all the way up to 7. We have not brought them back at all because basically what we have done with our older kids is we're doing socially distanced dummy classes. Now, if you ask a 4-year-old to socially distance, it's impossible. So we have not brought them back yet. I really hope that we can get the kids back to having classes, the little kids and the bigger kids having normal classes, because that was really fun. We'd really kind of figured out how to teach those little kids and what we were going to teach them all the time. And that class went from being kind of a nightmare to super fun in the last year or so. We really kind of hit our stride with it. And then we had a lot of kids that had been doing it for a while, which kind of served as leaders in the class and could kind of direct some of those newer kids. And so, yeah, I just want to get back to open mat and having the little kids back.
So what are the full range of classes that you offer here?
So we do like traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with a gi. We do no-gi Jiu-Jitsu, which is submission grappling. A little bit different rule set, but roughly the same. A little bit closer to wrestling than traditional martial art.
Gotcha.
We do judo, which is throwing mostly, takedowns. We do MMA, and we do some of our MMA classes are more wrestling, like takedown focused. So no-gi takedowns. Some of them are more striking focused.
Sure.
And then we also have classes that are specifically, we've got one class on Sunday, for women only. And then we have another class on Sunday that's for 35 and up.
Oh,
so
nice.
Older.
Nice.
So you don't have to go with those 21-year-olds in college, making you feel slow and old.
Right. I'm intrigued by the women's. It's a women's jiu-jitsu class, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm intrigued by that. How many women take jiu-jitsu here?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely largely male.
Yeah,
like by a long way.
That's why it piqued my curiosity.
But we've done some seminars over the time that we've been open, and we'll get 12 to 15 women to come do a self-defense seminar, and it's kind of like, well, I'm not going to show you how to defend yourself from an attacker in 2 hours. It's just not going to happen. But I'm going to start showing you jiu-jitsu, and if you keep coming, then you're going to have a lot better idea about how to defend yourself. So before the pandemic, I mean, we were getting, maybe 8 to 10 women in that class. We probably maybe had 20 total in the school. So still a pretty small part of the school, but it was up there. Since then, it's been a lot less.
Yeah.
It seems like that women's class that we do on Sundays has been a little bit slower to come back compared to some of the other classes. And it might just be related to people's, like I said, risk tolerance to come back. And I'm hoping once we're, into 2021 and we're going to keep having the class, for a long time, we didn't have a women's only class because we thought, well, we need enough women to run it. And turns out we were kind of backwards on that. And we should have started it with, two women and built it from there, because a lot of people have the barrier to come in as they don't want a big sweaty guy, all over them for an hour. So having that women's jiu-jitsu class is more of a friendly entryway into the world of Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And once we launched it, we kind of figured out, like, oh yeah, this is what we should have been doing all along. We should have had this. Yeah,
and word of mouth advertising is fantastic too. You just start small and kind of they'll start telling their friends.
I mean, more effective than anything, any advertising that we could do. More effective than people looking us up on Google or finding our website. I mean, word of mouth is the way.
Yeah,
for sure.
Absolutely. Who are some of your personal heroes and why? Who inspires you? That's a better way of phrasing it.
I don't know, just the people I'm around, seeing what they do. All the other instructors here, like I said, I've known them for almost 15 years, most of them.
Right.
And they push me to be better, and I try to push them to be better. I watch a lot of different things online and listen to a lot of audiobooks and that sort of thing. I'm really kind of into psychology. I have a minor in psychology from UNL, and so I like to read and listen to a lot of that sort of thing as far as like, personal development and growth that way. But I don't think I have a person really in mind that
Right.
I really focus on. I try to listen to a lot of different people, but I've kind of read a couple books during the pandemic. Was really good. I listened to a bunch of books on Audible. Coddling of the American Mind was great. I like Jonathan Haidt. I think he's very interesting. Grit, Angela Duckworth did that book. Really good. Talks about doing hard things.
Yeah.
And that kind of really resonated with me. Yeah.
My wife for Christmas a couple of years ago got me an Audible membership, and I think that's what I listened to is self-development books for a good 6 months.
Right.
And I ran the gamut from people from Michael Strahan to David Goggins
Right.
to Jesse Eitzer's book. Aubrey Marcus has a fantastic book. He was former CEO of On It. Had a fantastic book that I listened to at the beginning of this year, and very self-development based, and it's kind of what inspired me doing this podcast was, finding my own personal mission statement through my own development and seeing how I can help other people along the way. So, what's one thing you've seen out of a student that surprised you that you didn't expect?
There's a couple people that come to mind immediately that were so uncoordinated that
Right.
they could barely walk down the hallway without, tripping over their feet. Stiff as a board.
Right.
Can't touch their toes. Can't even barely touch their knees. And over the course of a couple of years, turn into some pretty good jiu-jitsu athletes, and not athletic, not super strong suddenly or super flexible or even super fast, but really technical. And, getting the opportunity to roll with some of those people, it almost makes me laugh. I'm in the middle of a roll and I'm just laughing because I'm like, oh, that was so good. Like, who are you? This
Right.
is awesome. It
That's
makes me
awesome.
so happy.
That's got to be pretty rewarding. Let's say I'm John Doe walking in off the street. I'm deciding that I would want to take classes at Lincoln Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What's some of the first things I can expect as a student?
One of the first things to expect is that when we start doing our warm-up drills, we just do some body movement stuff up and down the mat. It looks really easy when you do it, when you see it.
Right.
And then you get down there and you're like, oh, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to make my body move this way. And it can be a little bit frustrating at first. But then what you'll find is that either the instructor or whatever student is closest to you will lay down on the floor with you and help you do it.
Right.
And that's just moving up and down the mat. And then we finish with our warm-up. Everyone gets up, grabs a drink, whatever. They all look fine, and you're completely winded. And you're like, "What? How are they like that?" And I'm like this. And then we start doing the technique. And you're trying too hard, and you're fighting yourself. And everyone else looks like they're just doing it nice and smooth. It's just, and then we get to the last part of class, and we go to put those techniques into some live rolls, and you completely forget where to put your hand every time, and you do it wrong, and you're backwards, and you're confused. And then you leave, and you think about it, and you're like, man, that was really hard. That was really fun. I think I'm going to try it again. And the people who do that, once I see them the second time, it's like, all right, you're in. You understand.
Awesome. That's got to be rewarding. Just recently, you held a seminar here with somebody that we've mentioned earlier in the pod. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we got hooked up with Hoist Gracie. He came and did a seminar here. We did it as cheaply as we could do it for the benefit of our members. We basically paid Hoist the entire fee that we charged anyone who came, and it was just a real break in the mundane, everything is crappy we can't do jiu-jitsu. It's a pandemic.
Right.
You know, constantly hearing bad news. You can't listen to all the stuff you hear on the news because you just get depressed about it. It was like, no, this is a fun thing that we're gonna do. We're gonna bring in this celebrity. Even my wife has heard of Hoist Gracie, and she doesn't know anything about MMA or jiu-jitsu really. Like, even she knows. She's like, oh, that's a big deal. It's like, yeah, it is a big deal, and it was really fun. I think we packed about 40 people into this room.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And he gave a 2-hour seminar, and it was a lot of fun.
Did you get to roll with him?
No, he didn't roll with anyone. He mostly showed techniques, then people worked him with a partner.
Oh, cool. Very, very, very cool. Very cool. You just mentioned and I think it's probably the second or third time we've brought it up in the pod today, is just dealing with the blahs of 2020. How do we get out of this? Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist?
I am an optimist. The more I read about it, the more I listen to stuff, like I said, psychology related, the more I realize that like being an optimist with an internal locus of control is a blessing. And not everyone has that.
Right.
And it's hard for me to, get into somebody else's shoes that doesn't have that. But for me, I'm an optimist. I'm always thinking like, what can I do to make it better? And the biggest thing that I see, because I spend a decent amount of time on social media. I'm doing stuff with the business, but also just messing around, killing time. And the thing I see is there's all these people that I know like are not leaving their house. They're getting into fights with people online, and they just need to get out. They just need to go act like something is normal. And acting as if is a really good strategy for a lot of people. Act as if you want to go work out. Right. And when you're done, you're going to feel great.
Absolutely.
But you have to get over that mental hump.
Right.
And so for a lot of people, I know a couple people specifically I'm thinking about that used to train here, haven't trained here for, in some cases, years. I just see them on these downward spirals where they're just, they're kind of hopeless.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're living your life online. Everything sucks online.
Yep.
Like you gotta come into the real world with some people who like you, right? Spend an hour around them, get a workout, get your endorphins up, right? And everything's gonna feel better at the end of that. And that's what really needs to happen for a lot of people. Whether it's jiu-jitsu or whether it's something else that you used to do outside of the house, obviously like be safe about it, as safe as you can be. Follow the restrictions that you have to, but like leave the house. You got to do something that is what would have been normal, 6 months ago.
It's almost, I often wonder whenever I look at it and I, think about it myself, I often wonder if there's not a segment of the population that's going to kind of emerge from this almost with that military sense of development where they've just been broken down to be built back up.
I hope so.
Yeah, I do too. That's where my optimism sits. And I think there's a lot of personal accountability that people have to kind of take on in order to be able to do that. They have to make that decision on their own at some point that, enough's enough. It's time to log off the Facebook. It's time to log off the Instagram and let's start living in the real world again.
Yeah, I mean, you just need to get outside of it.
Yeah.
You need to know that there's more out there than just what you see.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody's trapped in their little thought bubbles with people that are either diametrically opposed or thinking the same way as them. And reality is you and I could have completely opposing viewpoints, but we could still be friends at the end of the day.
Well, and what I see online is people just picking fights with people.
Right.
It's like, well, you're bored.
Yep.
You need to go do something.
Yep.
You need to not fight with a stranger on the internet.
Right. And I think that also is because the endorphin rush from it is the same as somebody paying them a compliment. It's like when somebody gives you a like, you get the same endorphin rush from that as you did if somebody engages you in a fight. It just depends on how you're wired. But no, I'm optimistic too. I think we're all going to come out of this a lot better than maybe we went into it to some degree.
I hope so.
So any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with, or maybe plug the school a little bit? And
Yeah, I mean, jiu-jitsu is awesome. Everyone knows it. And you should come try it. We do a free week trial. So even if you don't like it, there's no commitments. But you just basically pick a class you want to do. We got it all on our website. Look at our schedule. You can see all of our procedures as far as how we're handling things during the pandemic, all of our cleaning protocols, all of the safeguards that we have in place. And basically you pick a class, you come in and try it. If you like it, you'll be here for a while.
Jerad, it's been a pleasure. It's very nice to meet you, finally.
Yeah,
I've been
thanks.
following you guys online for a long time, and thanks for doing the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Sure. I expect you in here next week.
All right, sounds good.
I want to give a big thanks to Jerad for having me at Lincoln Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Center this afternoon. If you have not liked their Facebook page yet, what are you waiting for? Get on, find their Facebook page, like them, check out a class, give them your business. They are good people. So just a little production note, if you've noticed this episode was a little bit more echoey than normal, it's because we were recording in the gym, which was a really cool environment to do that in and to talk about this subject matter in. Speaking of being good people, if you have not given us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app, please do so. Write a little review, give a little bit of feedback. This pushes us to the top of the search engine when people are looking for new content. And one last thing, we have 5 more episodes in the pipeline for the next month, so we will have plenty of content for you to follow up on. This has been Caught on the Mic with Michael Clark. Until next time, thank you.